I'm Sarai.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Welcome back to Seamwork Radio, where we share practical ideas for building a creative process so you can sew with intention and joy. Today, we're talking about sewing spaces, but maybe not in the way you'd expect. We're going to cover why the Pinterest Perfect Sewing Room might actually be working against you, what your space genuinely needs to support your creativity, and what you can safely let go of without it affecting your sewing one bit. All right, let's get into our icebreaker for today's episode. All right, Haley, tell me about the worst place you've ever tried to sew, like the most ridiculous setup where you somehow produced a finished garment anyway.
Oh, gosh. Well, the one that comes to mind is I used to dress at fashion shows, like as a side gig for some extra cash. And when I was like freshly out of college, and I was like one of few people who had sewing experience backstage. So sometimes I would be asked to do like quick fixes or alterations, but it was always like a sewing machine in like the dark backstage area, perched on a chair.
Yeah.
So I'm like squatting on the ground in front of the sewing machine with my leg kicked weirdly out on the foot, like foot on the foot pedal, trying to like nip something in the waist or fix a hem really quick. So that wasn't like start to finish fixing something, but definitely horrible, low light, bad ergonomic situation.
Yeah. I think most of the places I've sewn have been pretty bad ergonomically until, the last several years. Lots of dining room floor cutting, that kind of thing. But I think the worst was when I lived in New York, my last year of college, my last year of undergrad, and I was renting a room in somebody else's apartment because there was a housing shortage in New York at the time. And so it was this tiny, tiny room, and it was basically big enough to hold like a bed. It had a closet, and that was about it. Like there was room to walk between the bed and the closet, and that was about it. But I still had my sewing machine, and I would set it up like on the bed because that was the only place I could put it to sew. And cutting was just an absolute nightmare. So I didn't do as much sewing at that point in my life just because there was no space for it.
How could you?
I know. There was no space for it. So I would sometimes go over to my friend's house to sew, but that was about it. I think that was the worst for me.
Yeah.
But it's all been mostly up until like the last 10 or 15 years. It was kind of gnarly.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I finally got my first desk, teeny tiny desk that was like a dedicated place I could leave my sewing machine out. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I've made it.
I know.
This was 6 years ago. Up until then, it was like, putting the sewing machine away and taking it out every single time.
Yeah. Mostly it's been dining room tables, which is not terrible.
Yeah.
It's not bad. But it's nice to have my own space now where everything can be out and about,
Yeah. It definitely can be helpful. But I will say, like, I've done, I sometimes wonder, do I do more sewing now than I did before?
Yeah.
I've definitely been able to create like lots of volume in ideal spaces. So I wouldn't let it be something that would hold me back if you're someone who's listening.
Yeah. And that's kind of what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good segue. But before we get to that, if you have an icebreaker for a future episode, you can leave a question for us in a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or if you want to leave it in a comment on Spotify, we'll answer it in a future episode. We love hearing you guys' icebreaker questions, and we love reading your reviews. It really helps other people to find the show too. So we super appreciate it when you leave a rating or a review. All right, well, let's get into our topic. So if you spend any time on Pinterest or Instagram looking at sewing spaces or creative spaces, it's really easy to come away feeling like your space really just doesn't measure up. I have a beautiful space now, and I still feel that way sometimes. The floating shelves with neatly rolled fabric, it's got matching storage bins, some enormous cutting table with nothing on it except one project being worked on, and there's natural light pouring in through spotless windows. I mean, All that still makes me jealous. And I think that a lot of us have absorbed this idea that if our space doesn't look like that, then we're not really set up to do our best work. And, I've definitely felt that way. We were just talking about all the circumstances we've had in the past with our sewing spaces, and most of them have been pretty scrappy. I've looked at my cutting table that's buried under half-finished muslins and thread scraps and thought, I need to sort all of this out before I can start anything new. But here's what I've realized. That thought is often just a very convincing form of procrastination. The perfect space can really become a reason not to sew. So the truth is, I've done some of my most satisfying sewing in some really chaotic conditions. And I've also stood in really beautiful, tidy studios and felt totally uninspired or just tired. So today, Haley and I want to talk about what actually matters for your sewing space. Haley, I know your space has gone through a lot of different phases. So what does it look like right now, honestly?
Well, right now, I'm very lucky to have a dedicated room. That's my my office. I work from home mostly, and also my sewing space, which is the first time in my life I've ever had that. But one of the things that is an obstacle for me at this point in time is that the room that I'm in now is not the room my office is going to stay in eventually when my youngest moves out of her crib, which will probably be like a year. She is going to move upstairs, and the room that I am in is going to become my daughter's shared room. So I've kind of just made use of the furniture and the storage I have, even though it's not ideal in the space that I'm in. It's just like all the reject furniture, you know? Because I don't feel super motivated to make it perfect when I know it's a temporary setup. And the space that I'm going to be moving into once they move into that room is like half of the size. So that's my current setup. It's totally functional. I would not call it like aesthetic by any means.
Yeah.
And the organizational system is like not super ideal, but I just am like, I'm not going to spend money on, a temporary issue.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you know something is temporary in your home, then you don't spend a lot of time making it the way you really want it.
I felt like for a while it was really like an obstacle to like I didn't feel inspired to work in the space, which was a bummer because it was the first time I had this like dedicated space. But maybe about 9 months ago or so, I did like a really big clean out and a big organization, and I just like made do with all of the stuff that I had. And it did make a big difference in my motivation. And I had just decided that I'm not going to let it like stop me from sewing things any longer. What about you? Tell me about your space.
So my space, I am really lucky because I have a totally separate space outside of the house. So my sewing space used to be my office that I work in. I also work from home most of the time. And my sewing space also used to be my office, and like it was a fairly large room. So it doubled as it was a sewing room, it was an office, it was also a guest room. So it did triple duty. And now I have a shed that we built out in the garage. I guess it's a she shed. I guess we can call it that. Or not in the garage, outside. So it's just like a retrofitted shed that we turned into a sewing studio. So I've got all my stuff out there. If you guys want to see it, it's on YouTube. I've got a couple of videos, 2 or 3 videos. Haley, you're in some of those videos too.
Oh, yeah.
When we were setting it up, remember? You were giving me some tips.
I remember that.
Yeah. So it's a little shed. It's fairly small, but it has space for everything I need. I've got a really cool sewing desk that was left to me by the previous owners of the house. I've got like a little koala cabinet for all my cutting and my fabric. It's a really, really cool space, and it feels very luxurious, especially because it's outside of the house. I can just go there, shut the door, and it's like a little sanctuary. But like I said, most of my life I have not had that. So I've had it both ways. I've had really kind of scrappy spaces, and now I have this dedicated space. So
It is really beautiful. I love the light, and the way that you set the whole thing up is really great.
Yeah, and it has a nice view and everything. It just gets very cold it has a heater, but it does get cold in the winter.
We've recorded the podcast in there before.
Yes, we have.
I remember. So I'm curious, are there any what is the biggest gap between how your sewing space is set, looks now, and how it actually functions, and have you made peace with that?
Well, I feel like when I set it up, I spent a lot of time thinking about the setup and how I wanted it to both look and function.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like that I found a good middle ground there. And I've as far as the way it looks, it's a functional space. And I feel like with a functional space, aesthetics are important to me in that everything looks kind of clean and airy and I'm able to see everything, but it maybe doesn't have the same cozy aesthetic as the rest of my house.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like function definitely takes priority in my sewing space, even though I want it to look nice and I want it to feel nice when I go in there. Yeah. So for me, it's a combination of how it functions and also how I personally feel when I go in there. Does it encourage creativity, or does it make me feel oppressed because everything is, messy or dark or whatever it is for you? What about you?
I think my biggest functional gap is definitely storage. I think I've done a really good job with what I have, but and I know where everything is. Everything has a home. Mm-hmm. Are the homes for things super accessible? Not always. Sometimes it takes things are in shoe boxes and stuff stacked up in the closet, and it can take a little bit of excavating to get the things that I want. So that's a pain point I would love to address in the future. And it's fine. It's fine. It is what it is. Has there ever been a time where you tidied and organized your space and it made you feel less motivated to sew? The act of organizing became the project instead of the actual sewing?
I guess in a way. So I don't spend a ton of time organizing and tidying. I try to do it in little bursts. So I will, after I finish a project, I'll usually spend 15 minutes just putting everything away and tidying up. And then every once in a while, I'll get the bug to really reorganize. There's a YouTube video I made pretty recently about thrift store items that I use to organize my shed, and that really helped. And I guess in terms of the time it takes away from sewing, yes, and that I might spend an afternoon doing that instead of sewing. But I don't think of it as making me less motivated. It's just a different activity that kind of prepares for the future, I guess.
Yeah. I have definitely found myself going on organizational side quests. I am also just, I really like organizing things. So for instance, I'll be okay, cool. I'm going to go and put the buttons on the dress today. I just need to go and go get my buttons out and pick which ones I want to use. And then I pull out the buttons box and I'm you know what? This is horrible. And before I know it, I've sat on the floor of my sewing space organizing buttons for 2 hours. And I'm well, bye time.
Yeah. That can happen.
That can totally happen. I do try to be more intentional about it these days and set aside specific time to work on my space rather than taking these little side quests.
Yeah. I will say, I think that's more fun, a detail task like that, organizing buttons or color coding things or labeling things. For me, that's all a lot more fun than just the act of you have this messy room, you have to tidy up and put everything away, and it just feels kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
So for me, I can definitely get lost in those tasks.
Yeah, they're little rabbit holes you can go down. And you can just keep going with it and going with it.
But I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No.
It's fun also. And I feel if it makes me more motivated later, then it's time well spent. So I consider that part of my sewing, you know?
It is just like how planning is a part of your sewing. I think the like maintaining of your stash and your space is all a part of that process. And you just have to surrender yourself to it sometimes.
Yeah. And it can be enjoyable for sure. All right. Well, let's get into our tips.
All right. I will kick us off. And our first tip is to start with a clear surface for your current project, just the one project. The single most functional thing in any sewing space isn't like a label maker or like having all matching baskets. I think that it's one clear, dedicated space for whatever you're working on right now. And this doesn't have to be like a cutting table. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be yours for the duration of the project. The problem most of us have isn't that our space is too small. It's that every horizontal surface seems to be doing like 3 jobs at once. I think of it kind of like a kitchen counter. You can cook in a really small kitchen if you have one cleared surface to work on. But you can't cook in you can have this big, huge kitchen. And if every single inch of the countertop is covered, then you can't work in it. And the same thing is true for your sewing room. So starting off with just creating one clear, dedicated space for your sewing session is the perfect first step, I think.
Yeah. It reminds me of what you were just saying about the kitchen. Just a couple days ago, I saw a picture of Julia Child's various kitchens, and she always had a pegboard in her kitchen with her husband would build a pegboard and outline all of her pots and pans for her on it. It's so cute. And she had that in like every kitchen that she had. And it's such a like a humble organizational thing, but it just reminded me like how important it is to have things up off of a surface so you have room to work.
Yeah, totally. I'm going to go hunt for that picture. I've seen people do that with tools, like in a garage. Like
we had that in our garage growing up, even though my parents didn't use tools very much. We still had it in the garage.
Have you ever used this method before, Sarai?
I try to. I do have a cutting table, and I try to keep it fairly clear. It doesn't always work out that way, though. It's hard, stuff piles up, and but I try to keep kind of like a corner of it open so that because I do feel like when you're sewing, you need that open space to work on whatever the next step is and have a place to pin and have a place, to do all that stuff. So I do try to keep kind of like, it's probably like a quarter of the cutting table just free and available for whatever I need to do.
Yeah, I'm very adamant about having a clear desk. So when I'm working on a sewing project, my desk is pretty large. It's my cutting table and it's my desk. And I make sure that the entire like left half of it has my cutting mat on it, and nothing can be there except for like pins and snips or something. And it can be, I find it like an essential part of my like setup, get in the headspace for sewing.
Yeah. One thing that helps for me is I have like a little, actually this is in the video on thrift store items. I have a little caddy. It's like a silverware caddy. And I use that for my tools, and just having something like that where you can move it around, like have your tools all in one place instead of scattered.
Oh, I love that.
Across the surface is very helpful to me.
I might have to steal that. I love that idea.
Yeah. Well, that kind of brings us to our next tip, which is that accessible tools matter infinitely more than organized tools. So I spend a lot of time like really carefully organizing my tools and just having everything in labeled containers and, super, super organized, and then not being able to find anything because I had put it away, the way I had designed it correctly, rather than intuitively where I would naturally go looking for it. So the question to ask about any tool is not necessarily where does this belong, but where will I actually look for this first? So for me, that means my most used scissors are right next to my machine. I have a little basket that I use, and I keep my thread snips in it. My seam ripper lives in there. Everything is right there. My pins are in a bowl on the cutting table. They're not like in a cute little tin on a shelf across the room. Everything is accessible to me. And it's not necessarily like a tidy system, but I spend 0 time hunting for things, which means I spend more time sewing. So there's a concept in organizing called first placement, which is the idea that things should live where you naturally reach for them, not where some kind of system says they should go. So you can apply that to your sewing tools and you'll save yourself more frustration than any drawer organizer would. So I find that super, super helpful.
I love that. I was just thinking about how I have a need for a similar thing in my sewing space right now, because I find myself at the beginning of every sewing session taking out the same 6 tools. And I'm like, maybe I need a little separate thing going on here.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm wasting a lot of time digging in my toolbox every single sewing session.
Yeah, it's helpful to think that way, and then you'll start to, if you just take a moment to think about it, you'll also start to realize, for example, I realized that I need more than one pin dish. I need 2 pin dishes. I need one by my sewing machine, and I need one on my cutting table.
Mm-hmm.
So I got some little magnetic pin dishes from Harbor Freight. Also, we have a YouTube video about
you
that.
Do.
I'm plugging YouTube a lot today. But you guys really should check out the channel. There's a lot of, if you're interested in sewing space setup, we've got some great videos over there. But yeah, I just taking a moment to think about it and, where you actually naturally reach for things is very helpful.
Yeah, I find that sometimes we get really hung up on having the sexy setup.
Mm-hmm.
It can be really easy to neglect the really practical
Yeah.
thing. Well, I have another unsexy sewing setup tip, and that is in regards to lighting. I think that lighting is one thing that's really worth heavily considering and investing in your sewing space.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a place I would encourage you to spend a little bit of money if you can, because it really can affect everything. Your ability to straight up see what you're doing, the color accuracy when you're matching fabric and thread. And honestly, I think your mood while you're working. Bad lighting, it can be physically exhausting and make you strain. And it can also be exhausting because it can make you misread your fabric and make mistakes. And it just makes everything a lot harder. You don't need a professionally lit studio, but you do need direct light on your sewing machine at a minimum, and general good light in the space. A daylight bulb and a basic adjustable lamp is inexpensive, and I think that it can make a really enormous difference if you sew in a basement or a room without much natural light. This is the thing that I would fix before anything else. Natural light is wonderful, but it's not mandatory. I've definitely sewn in places that lacked it. What you need is enough light and in the right places.
Yeah. And even if you do, I have a lot of natural light in my sewing shed, but a lot of times I'm sewing in the evening. So especially in the winter, it's dark most of the time where we live. So I definitely need that. And I'm actually on the hunt for a new task light for my sewing room. We're thinking about doing a video about stuff you can find at IKEA for your sewing room. So I was thinking about going there and looking for a new task light. Because my eyes are not what they used to be. I was sewing last night and I was like, oh my goodness. I was doing some top stitching and I just, my needle threader is broken, so I have to thread it myself. And it
not great.
About 10 tries before I get it right.
Especially where you're using top stitching thread. Yeah, even worse.
I'm just guessing. I'm just shoving the thread in the general direction of the needle. And
sometimes I do it by feel. I'll put my finger to the back of the needle and just I'm let's rely on some other senses here.
I do have glasses, but I often forget to bring them out there. So I didn't have my glasses.
Sewing room glasses.
I know.
Sari.
I need a new pair of glasses.
You need to put them in your caddy.
I need to buy 20 pairs of cheap glasses and just keep them everywhere.
I don't need reading glasses yet, but I have 2 pairs in my house because I have a lot of friends and family who need them, and I worry about their eyes.
Yeah, I don't wear glasses day to day, but I do need them for computer work and for reading, and apparently for sewing because I can't see anything anymore.
You've graduated.
Yes, my eyes have graduated to Old lady eyes. All right. So our next tip is to build systems around how you actually work, not how you think you should work. So there's a version of sewing organization that looks really great in a YouTube video and absolutely does not survive contact with how people actually sew. I know people who roll their fabric beautifully. I personally fold mine in a drawer and I just shove it in by fiber and by color. And, both ways are fine. Both of us can find what we need. I think the question to ask when you're setting up any system is, what will I actually do in the 30 seconds between having this thing in my hand and needing to put it down? And that's your system. So not the aspirational version, but, the real one. If you always leave your thread on the machine because you're about to use it again tomorrow, then just let it live there. If you sew in bursts and you leave projects mid-stage, design your sewing space around being able to pick up mid-project rather than storing everything perfectly between sessions. Your space should make it easy to start sewing again and not make it harder. I think that's the most important thing. So, Haley, do you have an imperfect habit in your space that you've stopped trying to fix because it actually works for you?
Yeah, definitely. I used to be really adamant about picking up and doing a total tidy between projects. I think this is probably leftover from sewing on a dining room table for so many years. And I was just finding that I wasn't doing that as much, and I was beating myself up a little bit about it. And what I started doing instead is allowing myself to have a landing zone. And for me, that is my ironing board. When I tidy up after I'm done sewing, I put all of my my VIP tools, my in progress project, and my instructions, if I have them printed, on my ironing board. And it's really nice because it allows me to pick it back up really easily, because right now I'm in a time in my life where I'm sewing in more short bursts. And also I don't have to spend a ton of time cleaning up every single time. It's just a 5-minute tidy. So that's been serving me really well. But I did have to let go of a little perfectionism in order to, do that. What about you?
Well, because I have a separate space, so it's been different depending on where I'm sewing. Because I have a separate space, when a project is in progress, I just let it be messy. I just leave things out. There's trash on my my cutting table sometimes. If I cut a pattern out and I have a bunch of leftover scrap, paper, whatever, it's fine. I don't worry about it because this space is, dedicated for sewing. So I do clean between projects, and that's kind of my middle ground. So if I were sharing a space, if it was, in a dining room or something like that, it would be a little bit different. I do have project baskets. So if I do need to clean up, I can just throw something into an in-progress basket and have it put away. If I know I'm not going to be working on it for a while, or I'm going to be switching to a different project and I want room to work on that other project, I'll do that. But for the most part, I don't worry about it when it's in progress, because it's creativity's messy,
Yeah.
I don't mind having stuff strewn around while I'm working on something. It's just part of it for me. So I don't worry about being perfect in that way.
Well, I could definitely take a page out of your book. Well, that kind of flows really well into our next tip, which is to give yourself permission to have a hot zone. Every functional creative space has what I like to think of as a hot zone. And this is an area that's always a little bit in progress, a little bit messy, because that's where the work is actually happening. And trying to eliminate the hot zone is like trying to keep your kitchen spotless in the middle of cooking. We have a lot of kitchen analogies today, but I find them to be appropriate for sewing. You can keep a clean kitchen while you're cooking, I guess, but you might drive yourself totally crazy in the process, and your food might end up being cold. So for me, the area immediately around my sewing machine and my ironing board is always going to have like thread clippings and some fabric scraps and whatever notion that I used last. And I've stopped trying to fight it. I do a quick clear at the end of a sewing session and then like put everything on my ironing board as my little like landing spot. But I don't try to like maintain that surface as like a display area when I'm in the middle of creating. For me, the goal of a sewing space is not to like look like no one used it. The goal is to support someone, myself, who might use it a lot.
Yeah. All right. And that brings us to our last tip, which I think might be the most important one, which is that the space you have right now is enough to start. I just wanted to point this out as we wrap up today. You don't need to wait until you have a better space or a bigger space or a dedicated room or a reorganized space in order to sew something beautiful. Some of the most skilled sewists I know work in corners of bedrooms or at kitchen tables or in tiny apartments with fabric stored under the bed. The constraints of a small or an imperfect space can actually make you more creative. You learn to work efficiently and prioritize projects, and also you stop accumulating things that you don't use, which I think is also, that's something I could personally get better at. I feel like I've accumulated a lot more since I've had a dedicated sewing space. What matters is that you can just sit down, see what you're doing, reach what you need, and have room to work on the thing in front of you. And if you have that, then you have enough. So yeah, that's it. Let me recap the points that we brought up today. We talked about 6 things, 6 tips. Start with a clear surface for your current project, just one. Accessible tools matter a lot more than organized tools. Lighting is the one thing worth really investing in. Build systems around how you actually work, not how you think you should work. Give yourself permission to have a hot zone, and that the space you have right now is enough to start, no matter what it looks like. So, what's your big takeaway from today's episode, Haley?
I think that my takeaway has me thinking about my type A kind of organized nature and how that and my like innate creativity can a lot of times be my superpower, but there's definitely been times where I've allowed orderliness to take priority over creativity, and like the mess that comes along with it. And for me, having parameters for the inherent chaos has been really helpful at removing the mental barriers to sewing, because I think a lot of the time it's like going to the gym, like the hardest part is getting there. It's the same with your sewing. Yes. The hardest part is getting started. And so I think often about what are the physical barriers to being able to sew more often, but what are the mental barriers and how can we work on minimizing those?
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking something really similar. I was thinking about so lately I've been thinking a lot about doing more drawing and painting, getting back into that. But right now my office where I have all my art supplies is in total disarray. It's like completely torn up because we had new floors put in and ripped out the old dingy dog stained carpet. And I'm going to be painting in there. So all the furniture's moved away from the walls, everything's stacked up. It's just, I can't really get in there. And so I've let that become a reason not to draw or paint because, I'll just wait until the space is reorganized and I have everything back where I want it. And it's going to be too hard to do right now. But I've realized that that's just it's just more of a mental barrier than a physical one. Like I could grab those art supplies. It's not a problem. I could do it at the dining room table. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
But it gives me an excuse not to do it. Even though it's something I enjoy. And I think that is something that we have to overcome with any creative practice, because there's always going to be something easier to do than be creative. It's always going to be easier to watch a TV show, now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with doing those things as well, but it's always going to be easier to zone out, look at social media, quote unquote gather inspiration on Pinterest or Instagram, or do some of those passive activities rather than something that's active and creative. But those activities don't necessarily have the benefits that doing a creative hobby does. So I do think there's like the physical barrier can actually substitute for the mental barrier, kind of like what you were saying, Haley.
Mm-hmm.
So I think whatever you can do to make your space feel conducive to your creativity is going to be a good thing. And it doesn't need to be perfect. So don't let your space become the barrier to being creative. All right. Well, we talked a lot today about what genuinely matters in a sewing space and what you can stop stressing about. But if you're in a season where you actually do want to rethink how your space is set up, we made something that I think you're going to really love. It's called The Ultimate Guide to Setting Up Your Sewing Space, and it's completely free. So this is a mini guide that's packed with our best practical tips for creating a sewing space that works for you, no matter how small or how imperfect your situation is. So we cover organizational ideas, the tools that actually make a difference, and how to think through your setup in a way that supports how you actually sew. So it's not about making your space look beautiful for photos. It's about making it work for real creative sessions. And you can download it for free at seamwork.com/go/sewing spaces. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. And if you liked this episode, please leave us a review. We mentioned this earlier, but they really help other people to find the show. So you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or a 5-star rating. If you don't want to write a review, can you just leave a 5-star rating? That really helps too. You can also leave us a comment on Spotify. You can leave us a rating on Spotify as well. And you can also follow us on YouTube at Seamwork Video. You can follow us on Instagram at Seamwork. And if you'd like to become part of the Seamwork community, head over to seamwork.com to learn how to join and sew your wardrobe with us. All right, that's it for us this week. I'm Sarai.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio.